Jax's revenge domain. He lifted his champagne flute in my direction like he was doing me some kind of favor instead of stabbing me in the back. I want to take a moment to recognize Lucas Harper for his exceptional work stabilizing our operations this year, Ryan said, standing there under those big projection screens showing our turnaround numbers in gold. His efforts have been instrumental in bringing Hamilton Industries back from the edge. The ballroom full of suits clapped politely. You know that kind of clapping, measured, professional, like they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ryan's smile got wider as he turned toward the cameras at the back of the room. But as we transition into our next phase of aggressive expansion, we need leadership that understands the vision I've been building for the past 2 decades. Which is why tonight I'm proud to announce that my nephew Mason Walsh will be stepping into the role of Chief Operations Officer effective immediately. My role, my title, the position he'd promised was mine if I delivered results. The name's Lucas Harper. I'm 48 years old, and until 3 days ago, I was the guy you called at Hamilton Industries when you needed the impossible fixed before the quarterly earnings call. Now I'm the guy who taught them that some things aren't actually theirs to give away. Let me back up and tell you how a $100 spa gift card became the most expensive mistake in corporate history. Hamilton Industries was bleeding out when I walked through their doors 18 months ago. On paper, everything looked manageable. Revenue down but not catastrophic. Margins thin but not dead. In practice, the company was dying from 1,000 small cuts. I should mention something about myself first. I spent 12 years in the Navy, discharged in 2005, then 18 years in the civilian corporate world. In the Navy, I was a logistics officer, coordinating supply chains, managing complex operations, solving problems that couldn't wait for committee meetings. When you're responsible for getting critical parts to a destroyer in the Persian Gulf, you learn to cut through the noise pretty quickly. The military teaches you something civilians often miss. Systems matter more than personalities. A good system works even when people make mistakes. A bad system fails even when everyone's trying their best. You can have the best intentions in the world, but if your process is broken, you're going to get broken results. Hamilton had broken processes. Real broken. Production schedules were constantly behind because materials showed up late or in wrong quantities. Quality control was catching defects after products had already shipped, destroying client relationships that had taken years to build. Warehouse inventory was complete chaos. Some facilities were overstocked on slow-moving items while others ran out of critical components right in the middle of production runs. The technology holding it all together was an absolute nightmare. Their ERP system was 15 years old and had been patched and modified so many times by different vendors that nobody fully understood how it worked anymore. Each of their 28 facilities had developed its own workarounds. Custom spreadsheets, local databases, even paper logs for tracking things the computer couldn't handle. When corporate needed consolidated reports, someone had to manually pull data from dozens of different sources and just hope the numbers were accurate. Ryan Walsh and I went back to 2003. We served together on the USS Constellation, him as a supply officer, me running logistics coordination. Back then, we actually worked pretty well together. He understood the operational side of things, respected the technical complexity. He knew that when the ship needed parts, you didn't just wave your hand and make them appear. There was real work involved, real expertise required. When he called me about the Hamilton job in early 2022, I figured I was joining someone who actually got it, someone who understood that operations isn't just about telling people to work harder, it's about building systems that let people work smarter. We have quarters, not years, he told me in that first meeting in his corner office. I need someone who can stabilize operations and get us back to profitability. You'll report directly to me. Full authority to make necessary changes. Full authority or full responsibility? I asked him. He smiled that same smile I'd seen 1,000 times on the ship. What's the difference? Authority means I can make decisions without getting second-guessed by every director who thinks their department is special. Responsibility means I get blamed when systems break but don't get the power to actually fix them. You'll have authority, he said, leaning back in his chair. Within reasonable parameters, of course. That phrase, reasonable parameters, should have sent me running for the exit. It didn't. I'd seen enough failing operations over my 18 years in corporate to know that if I could turn this one around, if I could actually build something that worked, I'd never have to prove myself again. So I took the job. The first 6 weeks, I didn't implement a single thing. I just watched. I visited every one of their 28 facilities, sat in production meetings at 6 a.m., walked warehouse floors during shift changes to see how things actually happened versus how the schedule said they were supposed to happen. I talked to machine operators who'd been doing the same job for 15 years, inventory clerks who knew where everything really was, shipping coordinators who could tell you which carriers would actually show up on time. I listened to facility managers complain about corporate mandates that completely ignored local realities. I watched quality inspectors explain defects that kept showing up over and over because nobody had bothered to fix the root cause. I sat with purchasing agents who showed me approval chains that required 7 different signatures just to order a $500 part. At the distribution center in Ohio, I learned that incoming materials were being logged in 3 completely different systems that didn't talk to each other. The warehouse manager, a guy named Pete, who'd been there for 12 years, kept his own spreadsheet because the official inventory count was always wrong. "This is what actually works," he told me, pointing to rows of data he'd been maintaining himself. "Everything else is just for corporate to look at." At the manufacturing plant in Tennessee, the production scheduler had built her own database to track machine maintenance because the corporate system didn't account for downtime. According to their system, this machine has been running perfectly for 6 months, she showed me. In reality, it's been down for repairs 3 times and we're behind schedule on everything because of it. At the facility in Texas, I discovered they were ordering the same specialty components as the plant in North Carolina, but paying completely different prices because nobody knew what anyone else was doing. Everyone was working incredibly hard, they were just working in chaos. I mapped everything over those first 6 weeks. Every data flow, every approval process, every system handoff, every workaround that existed because the official process didn't actually work. What I found was this. Hamilton Industries didn't need better people. It needed a functioning nervous system. The company had grown through acquisitions over the past 15 years. Each time they bought another facility, they just bolted it onto their existing structure without really integrating anything. So you had the original Hamilton processes from Connecticut, the systems from the Georgia acquisition in 2010, the completely different setup from when they bought out Morrison Manufacturing in 2015. Instead of taking the time to properly merge everything, corporate had just layered new requirements on top of old ones. The result was organizational scar tissue, rigid, fragmented, and incredibly painful to work with. I knew better than to try ripping everything out at once. Companies don't survive big bang transformations, especially when they're already struggling. I'd seen too many well-intentioned projects crash and burn because someone decided to fix everything simultaneously. You start small, you prove it works, then you expand. I started with data. All those fragmented systems I'd been documenting, the old ERP, the facility databases, the endless spreadsheets, the paper logs, they all generated information. It was just scattered across 28 different locations in 15 different formats, with no way to see the big picture. You couldn't make good decisions because you never had complete information. So I built a new layer through my own company, Harper Systems Integration. Think of it as a translator that sits above all the existing chaos and pulls information into one unified structure. Nightly extracts from each data source, automated cleaning, and normalization, consolidated dashboards that showed real-time operational status across all facilities. The key was making it transparent. I wasn't replacing their existing systems. Those would take years to change and would cause massive disruption. I was just giving them a window into what was actually happening across their entire operation. I ran it quietly at first, just me and the server in my office processing data overnight. For 4 weeks, I sent experimental reports to 3 facility managers I'd built relationships with during my visits: Pete in Ohio, Sarah in Tennessee, and Rodriguez in Texas. "Try using this for your production planning," I told Pete, handing him a dashboard that showed real inventory levels across all their warehouses, not just his local numbers. He came back 3 weeks later with results that made me feel like maybe I was onto something. Machine utilization was up 14% because he could finally see when materials would actually arrive instead of just guessing. Overtime was down because he wasn't scrambling to catch up when shipments were late. On-time delivery improved because he could schedule based on reality instead of hope. "This is the first time in 12 years I've been able to plan more than 2 days ahead," he told me. "How did you get all this information?" "It was already there," I said, "just nobody could see it all at once." Sarah in Tennessee had similar results. She'd been dealing with a quality control problem for 8 months, random defects that seemed to appear without any pattern. Using the integrated data, we traced it back to a supplier issue that was affecting 3 different product lines across multiple facilities. Nobody had seen the connection because each facility was only looking at their own problems. Rodriguez found a logistics routing error that had been costing them about $22,000 per quarter in unnecessary freight charges. The system was automatically routing shipments through a distribution center that had been closed 6 months earlier, adding an extra 400 miles to every delivery in his region. At month 2, I convinced Ryan to let me pilot the system across 5 facilities. We sat in his office while I walked him through the architecture diagrams. "We already have systems," he said, frowning at the technical drawings. "We spent $2.8 million on that ERP upgrade 3 years ago." "Your systems don't work," I replied. "That's why your facility managers have built their own databases and spreadsheets. This doesn't replace anything you've already invested in. It just makes it useful. This will cost money we don't have." "It's already built," I said. "The pilot cost you nothing except letting me connect to your data feeds. If it doesn't work, you can fire me and you'll be exactly where you started. If it does work, you'll finally know what's actually happening in your own facilities." He stared at the diagrams for a long time. In the Navy, he would have understood this immediately. You need good intelligence before you can make good decisions. But 18 years in corporate had trained him to think about budgets and approvals instead of solutions. 3 months, he finally said. "If I don't see measurable improvement in 3 months, we shut it down." The pilot worked. Materials stopped arriving at the wrong facilities because the system could finally track what was actually needed where. Production schedules became reliable because we could see real-time capacity and maintenance windows instead of just hoping machines would be available. Quality issues decreased because we could identify patterns that had been invisible when everyone was only looking at their own piece of the puzzle. The 5 pilot facilities started outperforming the rest of the company so dramatically that the board started asking questions. Weekly performance reports showed clear differences: higher efficiency, fewer delays, better quality metrics, reduced overtime costs. "What's different about these facilities?" asked Nicole Peterson, the CFO, during a quarterly review. Ryan looked uncomfortable. "Better execution of existing processes. Execution doesn't explain a 23% improvement in on-time delivery," Nicole replied, looking at her printouts. "These aren't incremental gains. Something fundamental changed." I spoke up. "They have better information. When you can see the whole picture instead of just your local piece, you make better decisions." "Can we scale this to all facilities?" asked Shane Rodriguez, one of the board members who'd actually spent time in manufacturing before moving into finance. Ryan nodded slowly. "Lucas has been working on that. It took 7 more months to roll out company-wide. Not because the technology was complicated, but because people resist change even when it makes their lives easier. Every facility manager wanted to understand exactly how it worked before they trusted it. Every department head wanted assurance that they weren't going to lose control of their local processes. I spent weeks traveling between facilities, sitting with teams, explaining how the data integration worked, showing them that this wasn't about replacing their expertise. It was about giving them better tools to do what they already knew how to do. The financial impact showed up gradually, then all at once. First quarter after full implementation, operating margin improved by 4.3 percentage points. Second quarter, another 2.7 points. Client complaints decreased. On-time delivery rates increased. Employee overtime dropped because work could be scheduled efficiently instead of reactively. By month 9 of the full rollout, Hamilton was solidly profitable again, not barely profitable, solidly in the black with improving trajectory every month. Ryan called me into his office on a Friday afternoon in October. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," he said, raising a coffee mug like he was making a toast. "You've bought us room to breathe." "Room to breathe isn't the same as being healthy," I replied. "You still have structural issues. Facility consolidation opportunities, client concentration risk, technology debt that needs addressing. One miracle at a time," he said with that smile I remembered from the ship. It wasn't a miracle, though. It was work. Methodical, detail-oriented work that most executives don't have the patience for. But I didn't argue with him about it. As the numbers kept improving month after month, so did my visibility around the company. Facility managers started copying me on decision emails that I'd never seen before. Nicole Peterson began using my dashboards and board presentations, pointing to specific metrics that showed operational improvements. Directors who'd barely acknowledged my existence 6 months earlier were now asking for my input on strategic decisions. But here's what nobody had paid close attention to from the very beginning. I hadn't come in as a standard employee when Ryan hired me. After getting burned at 2 previous companies where I'd built critical systems only to watch executives take credit and then eliminate my role once things stabilized, I'd learned to protect myself better. When Ryan brought me on board, yes, I'd agreed to join his organizational chart as head of operations strategy, reporting directly to the CEO. But the platform itself, the data infrastructure, the integration layer, the dashboards and analytics that were now running the entire company, those were delivered through my own company, Harper Systems Integration. We'd drafted a clear licensing and services agreement before I'd written a single line of code. The document was 23 pages long, and Ryan's legal team had reviewed every word of it. Harper Systems owned the platform architecture and all associated intellectual property. Hamilton Industries had a license to use it across their operations, as long as they maintained an active support contract and paid the agreed licensing fees. They could not attempt to reverse engineer the core components. They could not build derivative works based on the architecture. They could not transfer the license to another entity without written approval from Harper Systems. Operational oversight of the platform remained with Harper Systems' designated technical lead, meaning me. If Hamilton wanted to terminate the arrangement, they could do so with 90 days written notice. I would provide transition support to help them move to a different system. The license would expire at the end of the notice period and they'd lose access to the platform entirely. But there was another clause buried in Appendix C that legal had reviewed but nobody in management had read carefully. In the event that Hamilton Industries materially alters or eliminates the operational authority of Harper Systems' designated technical lead without prior written mutual agreement, Harper Systems may at its sole discretion transition the platform to restricted access mode and/or terminate the license with immediate effect. We'd negotiated that language specifically. Ryan's lawyer had approved it, Ryan himself had signed it. Then, like most contracts, it had disappeared into a digital filing cabinet where nobody thought about it again. I kept my own copy in a fireproof safe at home. At one executive meeting in November, Shane Rodriguez asked the question that should have made everyone pay attention. What happens if Lucas leaves? How do we protect this transformation? Ryan laughed, that confident laugh he'd perfected over 18 years of climbing the corporate ladder. We'll integrate what he's built into our core infrastructure, make it permanent part of our operations. It is permanent, I said quietly from my seat at the far end of the conference table. It's just not yours. A few people glanced in my direction, but nobody asked what I meant, because by then, the system was working so well that it felt inevitable, like something that had always existed. They'd gotten comfortable with it. They'd forgotten that 18 months earlier, they'd been on the edge of bankruptcy. I didn't think about that clause in Appendix C most days. The arrangement was working perfectly. Hamilton was profitable again, my platform was proving its value every day, and Ryan seemed genuinely appreciative of what I'd accomplished. The monthly licensing fee of $18,500 was getting paid on time. The annual support contract was up for renewal in March, and there hadn't been any discussion of changing the terms. But things started shifting in subtle ways as 2023 moved into 2024. Ryan began taking more credit for the turnaround in public settings. At the quarterly board meetings, he'd present the operational improvements as strategic leadership initiatives without mentioning the platform that made them possible. When industry publications wrote about Hamilton's recovery, the articles quoted Ryan exclusively. My name appeared occasionally as head of operations strategy, but never in connection with the systems transformation. I didn't mind the lack of public recognition. I'd been in corporate long enough to understand that CEOs get credit for everything good that happens during their tenure. What bothered me was something else. Ryan was starting to talk about the platform like it was Hamilton property. Our data integration capabilities give us a competitive advantage, he'd say in client presentations. Our real-time operational visibility allows us to respond faster than anyone else in the market. Hour. In February, Mason Walsh joined the company. Mason was Ryan's nephew, 28 years old, MBA from Stanford, 18 months of consulting experience at a prestigious firm in San Francisco. He came in as Director of Strategic Operations, a newly created position that reported directly to Ryan. Fresh perspective, Ryan explained to the executive team when he introduced Mason at the monthly leadership meeting. Someone who understands how modern businesses leverage technology for competitive advantage. Mason was smart, I'll give him that. Well-educated, articulate, full of energy and ideas. He used phrases like digital transformation and data-driven decision-making and operational excellence through technological innovation. He'd clearly read all the right business books and attended all the right seminars, but he didn't understand the difference between talking about systems and actually building them. In his first month, he spent a lot of time in meetings asking good questions. How does the data flow work? What are the key performance indicators we track? How do we ensure data quality across multiple sources? He took extensive notes and asked for documentation about everything. In his second month, he started offering suggestions. Maybe we could automate more of the reporting processes. Could we add predictive analytics capabilities? What about machine learning algorithms to optimize scheduling? By his third month, he was presenting his own PowerPoint slides to the board, talking about next generation operational optimization and leveraging our data assets for strategic advantage. I watched this progression with growing unease. Not because Mason was ambitious, ambition is fine. Not because he was Ryan's nephew. I'd seen plenty of competent family hires over the years. What worried me was that he was starting to position himself as the architect of our technological capabilities when he didn't actually understand how any of it worked. At a board meeting in May, Mason presented a 47-slide deck about Hamilton's digital future. He talked about expanding our analytics capabilities, implementing artificial intelligence solutions, and taking our data platform to the next level. When Shane Rodriguez asked who would lead these initiatives, Mason's answer was smooth and confident. I've been working closely with our technical teams to understand our current capabilities. I believe we have the foundation in place to build something really revolutionary. Our technical teams, our current capabilities, our data platform. After the meeting, I pulled Ryan aside in the hallway outside the conference room. We need to talk about Mason's role, I said. Ryan smiled, that same easy smile he'd been using since the Constellation. He's bringing great ideas to the table. You should be proud. What you built is inspiring the next generation of innovation. What I built isn't Hamilton property, Ryan, you know that. Of course, he said quickly. I just meant that Mason understands the strategic value of what you've created. He's helping us think about how to maximize that value going forward, as long as we're clear about the ownership structure. Absolutely. Nothing's changing there, but something was changing. I could feel it in the way conversations stopped when I walked into rooms, in the way Mason was increasingly copied on emails about platform performance and strategic planning, in the way Ryan started referring to our technology leadership team instead of just Lucas. The anniversary celebration was Ryan's idea, a big party to showcase our turnaround, get some positive press coverage, show potential clients and investors that Hamilton Industries was back in fighting form. Black tie event at the downtown Marriott, 200 guests, open bar, local business media invited. I figured I'd get some recognition for the transformation, maybe a public acknowledgement of the platform's role in the company's recovery. At minimum, a conversation beforehand about what the next phase would look like. Instead, I got blindsided. The applause from Mason grew louder, more enthusiastic than what I'd received. He walked onto the small stage they'd set up near the front windows, his custom suit probably costing more than I'd spent on rent in the past 6 months. He shook Ryan's hand for exactly the right amount of time while photographers captured the moment from multiple angles. I didn't wait for the speech to end. While Ryan talked about legacy and vision and the importance of family values, in business leadership, I turned and walked out of the ballroom, down the corridor lined with framed awards and magazine covers featuring Ryan's face, past the executive wing with its thick carpets and original artwork. No one stopped me. No one called my name. Their attention was locked on the stage, on Mason, on the future they thought they were celebrating. Ryan's office door was open when I reached it. He was already inside. Somehow he'd slipped out during the applause. His suit jacket hung on the back of his chair, and he was pouring himself bourbon from a crystal decanter, looking satisfied with himself. "Oh," he said when he noticed me in the doorway. His tone was warm, casual, like we were old friends catching up. "Hell of a night, isn't it? You should be proud." "Proud of what?" "The turnaround you executed was exactly what we needed," he said, taking a sip of his drink. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. "You told me results were all that mattered. They do. You delivered exceptional results. But operations and leadership are different skill sets. Mason has the background for where we're going next." "Background?" I said. "He has an MBA from a school his family donated a library to. I have 12 years of Navy logistics experience plus 18 years in corporate operations. I just pulled your company out of a nosedive that would have ended in liquidation. Ryan set his glass down and looked at me with something approaching sympathy. You're upset. I understand that. But this decision isn't about diminishing what you've accomplished. It's about strategic positioning for our next phase. You promised me this role if I hit the targets, and you'll be taken care of, he said smoothly. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small envelope, cream-colored, expensive paper. He slid it across the polished wood surface toward me. I opened it. Inside was a gift card, $100 to a high-end spa downtown. Take some time off, Ryan said, gesturing at the card like it was generous. You've been running hard all year. Go relax. You've earned it. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was distant music from the ballroom and the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system. I looked at the card, $100, roughly what I'd spent on coffee alone during the first month when I was working 18-hour days trying to untangle their inventory system. I looked back at Ryan. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I slid the card into my jacket pocket. Thank you, I said. His eyebrows lifted slightly. That's it? That's it. I walked out of his office, past the ballroom doors where Mason was now surrounded by executives eager to introduce themselves, down the elevator, through the lobby, out into the November cold where my breath formed clouds in the air. Ryan thought that was the end of it. What he didn't understand was that at 9 a.m. the next morning, Hamilton Industries would discover that the systems keeping them operational weren't actually theirs, and the licensing terms were about to change dramatically. I didn't go home immediately. I drove to my office 4 blocks away, made coffee, sat down at my workstation. The administrative console showed Hamilton's license status: active, renewal in 19 days, support contract active, technical oversight assigned to Lucas Harper. Below that were 3 options invisible to anyone at Hamilton: modify oversight status, enable restricted access mode, terminate license. I didn't hit terminate. This wasn't about destruction. It was about correction. I clicked modify oversight status. A prompt appeared. Has there been a material change to Harper Systems designated technical oversight without prior written mutual agreement? Yes. Initiate restricted access transition? Yes. Select delay before restricted mode activates. 0 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, 72 hours. I selected 24 hours, not for maximum chaos, to give them 1 business day to realize what they'd done and fix it. 1 chance to call me and have an actual conversation about operational authority and contractual obligations. Final prompt: confirm. At 0900 next business day, Hamilton Industries will transition to read-only access. Historical data remains visible. New data integration, exports, and dashboard updates suspended until remediation agreement executed. I clicked confirm. Then I went home and slept better than I had in months. They discovered it at 9:07 the next morning. At 8:45, everything had been normal. At 9 o'clock, something changed. The dashboard still loaded, historical data was visible, but no new information was flowing in. Real-time status indicators showed stale information from the previous day. Export functions were grayed out. The system hadn't crashed. It had simply stopped moving forward. Read only. My phone started ringing at 9:04. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:06, Ryan's direct line. I answered on the 3rd ring. Lucas, we have a problem, he said, skipping any greeting. The system isn't updating. None of the facilities can get current data. The license transitioned to restricted access mode at 9 a.m. this morning, I said calmly. Exactly as specified in your agreement with Harper Systems Integration. What agreement? The licensing and services agreement between Hamilton Industries and Harper Systems. Section 7, subsection 3. You triggered the material change clause yesterday when you announced that operational leadership was being transferred to Mason without consulting me or modifying our contract. You can't just shut us down over a promotion. I didn't shut you down. Your teams have full access to historical data. They just can't update anything or generate new reports until we have a conversation about how this arrangement is going to work. The conference room was packed when I arrived at 2 p.m. Ryan at the head of the table, tie loosened. Mason 2 seats down, arms crossed. Nicole Peterson, general counsel, 2 board members, and a speakerphone glowing with an active call. I took the spa gift card out of my jacket and placed it in the center of the table. "What's that?" Mason asked. I looked at Ryan. "You remember this?" "Let's not make this personal," the general counsel said. "This isn't personal," I replied. "That card is what Ryan thought my work was worth after I spent 18 months pulling his company back from insolvency. Today we're discussing what it actually costs to function without me." "What are our options?" Nicole asked quietly. "Option 1, I said. You proceed as planned. Mason takes over operations. In 19 days, when license renewal comes due, I don't renew. The platform disconnects completely. You're free to rebuild from scratch. We'll have internal replacement operational in 6 months, Mason said. You don't even know where the data sources are, much less how they're normalized. The platform processes 75,000 individual data reconciliation decisions every night. You're replicating that in 6 months? How long with a qualified vendor? Asked the voice from the speakerphone. 12 to 18 months minimum. Probably longer. That assumes you find someone competent and your institutional knowledge doesn't walk out when frustrated employees quit during the transition. Cost would be 3 to 4 million. And with you, Ryan asked quietly, I can restore full functionality in 45 minutes once we have signed remediation terms. What terms? 3 things. First, new 5-year licensing agreement at current market rates. $420,000 annually instead of the $222,000 you're paying now. Second, explicit operational authority clause requiring my written consent for any changes to technical oversight. Third, you issue corrective communication acknowledging the platform is business-critical infrastructure. Ryan stared at the gift card. That's nearly double what we're paying. It reflects the actual value of what you've been getting at discount. When we originally negotiated, you were near bankruptcy and I was unproven. That's no longer true. They signed at $447 that afternoon. 5-year term, licensing fees at $420,000 annually. Explicit language requiring Harper Systems' written consent for operational authority changes. I restored full access at 5:03 p.m. Within minutes, facility managers saw their dashboards update with current data. The company exhaled. 3 months later, Mason left Hamilton Industries. The official announcement said he was pursuing other opportunities. Reality was that he'd struggled to find any meaningful role after being moved away from anything requiring actual technical knowledge. The spa gift card hangs framed on my office wall now, not as a trophy, as a reminder that some people look at complex systems that save companies and think, this was a nice project. I can hand it over to family now. Your value isn't determined by your title or position on the org chart. It's determined by what stops working when you're not there. And if you're smart, if you're strategic, if you protect yourself before becoming indispensable, you can make sure that when someone tries to replace you with their nephew and a gift card, they discover very quickly that some things aren't actually theirs to give away. 6 months later, Hamilton's operational metrics were the best in their industry. The platform I'd built continued evolving, adding capabilities as new needs emerged. Ryan and I maintained a professional relationship, cordial but forever changed. The friend I'd served with on the USS Constellation was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned the hard way that loyalty has to run both directions. Sometimes the person sitting in a small office running systems nobody else understands is the one who actually controls whether the company functions tomorrow morning. The real lesson isn't about contracts or leverage. It's about understanding that respect isn't given based on titles or bloodlines. It's earned through competence and protected through preparation.